What an episode they just dropped on us last night. There's a mammoth amount to unpack in this episode, especially around that final act with the wedding. You gotta love a wedding in the Song of Ice and Fire universe. As they say, it's never a dull affair. Let's get straight to it, the feast. This was a brilliant scene, and I want to highlight director Claire Kilner here. She also directed the previous episode, which was my previous favourite episode of the show, until this one dropped, and apparently she's directing episode 9 later on in the season. If this follows the same trend as earlier seasons of Game of Thrones, then that'll be a huge episode. I think she's been a brilliant addition to the roster of directors for the show, and I hope she returns for season 2. This scene was straight up masterful. I loved seeing the expansion of the world with the dancing. It was wonderfully choreographed and all well woven together with the editing. For a 20-minute segment, it flies by and takes so many twists and turns. There's a ton of things happening in the scene and we need to break it down. This could probably be its own video, there's just so much happening here. When Alicent arrives fashionably late, it interrupts the king's speech. And in a clunky bit of exposition, Larry Strung and Saharan Strung explain to us why this is a small act of defiance. Think back to the last episode where Alicent tries to reject the king's request and still has to go to his bedchambers. Now watch this scene in contrast. She shows up in the colours of the Hightower house. This was a purposeful act and a public display of rebellion, and I'm not fully sure the series knows what the hell is going on here. It's more of a message to Rhaenyra though, as Alicent refers to her as stepdaughter. It's formal and cold, and shows the state of their relationship after a brief period of time where things were mending between them. At first, I thought Daemon was going to be the epicenter of this explosion. He starts off with winding up a Royce from the Vale, before approaching Rhaenyra for a dance and suggesting she marries him instead, considering he's back on the market and ready to mingle. Viserys is watching this from afar like a damn hawk while stuffing his face. Then there's Joffrey, Laena's paramour, and I absolutely loved how he found out about Criston Cole. It was subtle but appreciated, and then he spells it out for the rest of the audience and Laena. However, he overplayed his hand massively, as we'll find out later. As Daemon approaches Rhaenyra and Viserys sees what we think is about to be a kiss, all hell breaks loose. And it's Criston Cole punching a hole into poor Joffrey's face. This is where things get surreal. Nobody does much other than watching the beating take place. There's a lot of observers. I'm not sure where Daemon ends up as he's separated from Rhaenyra. Now, this is extremely important. There's a lot of shoving and small amount of fighting, but the main people who get hammered are related to House Velaryon. Joffrey gets his head caved in by Criston Cole. Laena, in his attempts to save Joffrey, gets beaten up for his efforts. And Laena, his sister, in an attempt to get closer to the action, gets apprehended and shoved down to the floor by a person wearing green clothing. Daemon is missing completely. There's something really amiss here, and I think these two lines from the show sum it up.
We are placing our son in danger.
The lords of the realm bent the knee to Rhaenyra and swore obeisance to her.
That was before there was a true-born prince named Aegon Targaryen. Rhaenyra's succession will be challenged.
The beacon on the Hightower. Do you know what colour it glows when Old Town calls its banners to war?
Green.
I did think the scene felt like an homage to Fight Club, where the narrator beats the shit out of Angel Face and the crowd initially are into the violence, then it gets out of hand and they look on in horror instead. Anyway, due to the fragility of the entire situation, this causes Rhaenyra and Laenor to wed without much of a spectacle, a far cry of what we were led to believe would happen. I think that scene tells you so much how fragile the situation is, because if you've seen weddings in Game of Thrones, they're big, grand spectacles. There's tournaments, there's huge weddings. I think Joffrey's wedding had like 100 courses. It's massive. And for them to exclude everyone but House Velaryon and the Targaryen household during this marriage, it is not looking great. Why did Criston Cole go psycho? Great question. I'm not really sure why he went to such an extreme. I think he's just been so thoroughly broken in the last couple of days. His rejection by Rhaenyra and the pedestal that he tries to place his honor on are in conflict. On one hand, he's trying to abandon Westeros and take Rhaenyra with him because he wants to live in a fairy tale. Rhaenyra does reject him, but she still wants him. She's trying to be pragmatic about the entire situation, but his pride gets in the way. I won't say honor though. The man can't be preaching about honor and how he's besmirched his cloak, then try and run away with the princess on the other hand. He would sacrifice Rhaenyra's honor to restore his own, it seems. It's not that though, it is pride. He responds that Rhaenyra wants him to be her whore. She ain't paying him to bed her. So he's had a huge overreaction to it all and storms off like a child. What really broke him was feeling like he's backed into a corner and everyone knows his dirty little secret. He spilled his guts to Alicent, and later Joffrey explains they can all play happy families. I think he took Joffrey's exchange as a threat, potentially, but I lean more strongly towards his pride and ego taking too much of a hit that everyone is happy with the situation but him. I'm going to break the rest of this episode down via houses because it's just easier to categorize all my thoughts that way, so House Targaryen. Another fantastic performance by Paddy Considine. If this is his last performance as King Viserys, then he will be sorely missed. He had so many wonderful moments in this episode. The shot of him and Rhaenyra in the carriage heading up the Driftmark was a nice callback to episode 3, where they were in the carriage to the hunting party. In that scene, Viserys, Aegon and Alicent share the screen, and Rhaenyra was isolated on the other end. Here it shows them united, and that's a theme throughout the episode. Especially when that dweeb from Ghastly Rock shows up and we get Viserys' wonderful facial reaction to that shit that just splurged from that man's mouth. It's very reminiscent of that Daenerys smile meme, you know the one. It was also sad to see the man struggling throughout the episode. He's just trying to get his affairs in order, and he has that heartbreaking scene with Lionel Strung and how he might be remembered, and how he wished he lived during a wartime so he could have been made stronger. It's a shame because the man has been taken apart literally and figuratively by the rats in his own court. I'm not even sure he could trust his own maester. That shot at the end could have a double meaning, and most likely it's a shout out to something further down the line. Just as his relationship with Rhaenyra seems to be on the up, it's all taken a toll and he collapses at the feast. Rhaenyra? Well, I just don't know what to say. I'm speechless here. She seems at the mercy of so much at the moment. If she were a man and was fucking around, she would be fine. But she's not, and she's fucked a ticking time bomb who just blew up the court and probably her marriage before it gets started. Laena knows that Cole was Rhaenyra's paramour before Cole killed his own. Rhaenyra is not privy to that information, but I definitely think that's going to be a huge bone of contention between the two going forward. She's blown up the relationship with Alicent. She practically dared Daemon to take her in that court for his queen. I think she played the game so well previously that this has been an absolute disaster for her. It started off well with her arrangement with Laena, but yeah, I'm just speechless about it all really. She's in a real rock and a hard place going forward and has so many enemies at court. Now, let's talk Daemon. Any doubts audiences had that this guy might be a good one should have evaporated within the first 5 minutes of the episode. That doesn't mean he's not a highly entertaining, morally grey character though. He gets a divorce in real brutal fashion by paralysing his wife and then finishing her off with a rock.
Consider that a divorce.
Is he just not great with strong women? He does all this without uttering a word. For a moment I thought we were going to get another classic Daemon episode where he doesn't talk but just wreaks havoc. But when this guy talks, I bloody listen. The man speaks such poetry and the way he can twist the knife, I don't think no one in all of Westeros does it like he does, and he's dropping one-liners like they're going out of fashion.
Who are you?
Sir Gerald Royce of Runestone.
And?
You know better than anyone. It was no accident.
Are you confessing some guilt, Sir Gerald? In King's Landing, men are made to answer for their slanders. Even old bronze cunts like you.
I love how he's not even bloody invited to the wedding and just shows up and they have to awkwardly grab him a chair and put him on the end. Give me a buddy cop show or a storyline with just Daemon and Lionel Strung. You can see Lionel wanting to die inside every time Daemon does something. Speaking of Lionel and House Strung, let's discuss the Strung family in House of the Dragon. I might have misplaced my faith in this man and his family. Lionel Strung is the new hand of the king and he has 2 sons, Littlefinger Jr., or Larry Strung as he's known in the show, and Sir Harwin Strung. I missed it a few episodes ago that these were brothers and Lionel's sons, but this episode made it abundantly clear that all is not what it seems, as is always the bloody case. First off, Larys. The way he was sucking up to Alicent and drove a wedge in between her and Rhaenyra was a real bastard of a move. He's playing dumb, but dropping bombs all over the shop. I definitely want to see what his endgame is here. His father is Hand of the King, so this was a strange move to play, although Larys is a second son, so doesn't stand to inherit anything because of that. Just like Otto Hightower, he has to carve out his own portion. I think Lionel Strong broke my heart. I thought we could trust him, but he gives this nod at the end of the episode to his son Harwin, which saves Rhaenyra from the chaos. He wasn't panicked, he seems in control and rather calm, as if he was okay with what was going down. Just felt so very suspect and gave me a sinking feeling he's a player and has wormed his way up the top and will be taken full advantage now he's there. One other thing about Sir Harwin, he was the member of the Gold Cloaks who caught Rhaenyra in episode 4 sneaking out. There's something going on there, I think. In regards to families, let's talk about the Hightowers. They're growing in presence despite the absence of Otto. Otto did share a great scene with Alicent and gave so much insight on why Otto wants Aegon named as heir.
The realm will not accept her, and to secure her claim, she'll have to put your children to the sword. She'll have no choice.
It's still incredibly self-serving though, and this wouldn't have been an issue if he hadn't put his daughter in the position of seducing the king and becoming his queen. Did at least start to light a fire under Alicent, and she starts to take the game more seriously, and this was further compounded by Larys Strong in the Godswood. This pushes her into speaking to Criston Cole to get to the bottom of the has she or hasn't she with Rhaenyra. Cole proceeds to absolutely fumble the bag. Biggest bag drop of the century. We're going to give this knight the canary as a sigil because he bloody sings like one. Alicent didn't even pull him under much duress and was asking in regards to Daemon, and Cole just spills his bloody guts out. I wish by episode's end she had let him literally spill his guts out, but it seems she'll be taken away from Rhaenyra and adding to her own guard with Cole. Anyway, because of this, Alicent no longer trusts Rhaenyra and that relationship has completely soured. Last but not least, House Velaryon. Things started well for this family, and by the end they get their marriage, but it was an absolute disaster. What should have been a crowning achievement for them was besmirched throughout. Corlys had his power play by making Viserys come to him to get this marriage sorted out between Rhaenyra and Laenor, and Corlys practically has Viserys begging and spelling it out for him. These scenes were filled with wonderful little moments such as Rhaenys meeting Viserys and noticing his fingers are missing, Corlys being progressive about how Rhaenys should have been queen despite being a woman, but then thinking his son being gay is just a phase.
He's still young. He will outgrow it.
There was also an interesting talk about succession. Would Rhaenyra be taking Laenor's name and the name Targaryen tying out? Ignore Daemon for a second. In fact, it will be Velaryon's name that will be most likely to die out, as no males or females born of the union between Rhaenyra and Laenor will carry the name Velaryon, which means the titles for Driftmark and its ownership will pass on to a Targaryen. It's a uniting and killing of a house, so to speak. The name might live on through Corlys' brother or other sons, but they just won't inherit those lands he currently has, because they will all be going through Laenor. I did absolutely love Corlys and Rhaenys' relationship. They're wonderfully in sync and seem to treat each other as equals. Even if others treat Corlys as the upper power, you can tell they love each other and are in lockstep. Though Corlys is definitely a little bit too naive in thinking people will keep their rose to Rhaenyra. One thing I really want to bring up is the passing of time in the show. Honestly, most of the time I can barely keep up. They're very fast and loose when playing with it, and it can be a little disorientating. For example, Laenor and Laena look like this in the pilot episode, then like this in the 3rd and 5th episodes. The visual and grotesque comedy of seeing Viserys, a 40-year-old man having to court Laena, the 12-year-old daughter of Corlys and Rhaenys, was a great way of portraying how marriages are handled in this world. From an audience perspective though, it's a little jarring. I'm not sure many people understand that these were the same people, because Rhaenyra was only 14 in episode 1 and little has changed in comparison. It also made it a little strange how fast Viserys has deteriorated from episodes 5 to 6. You're not made to believe that much time has passed, so it just feels very abrupt. Though, this could be because the Maester doesn't have the king's best interest at heart. Anyway, that just about wraps it all up, I think. Hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did, and I'll be back next week for episode 6 of House of the Dragon. Make sure you're subscribed for when that video drops.